Many voters will want from the ANC is some firm direction on the economic front. President Ramaphosa has been pushing for investment and last year held two major summits, one for potential investors and another on jobs. Well, Josef Busha of is the MD of GM Busha, joins me now for a closer look ahead at the prospects. Josef, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Good evening to the listeners.
So you have jobless voters on the one end watching this manifesto. On the other end, you have cautious, perhaps reluctant investors also keeping a very close eye on this manifesto. Who do you think will matter most on Saturday to the ANC?
Well, if you look in terms of the life of a politician, they'll look at the voter first, the people who make them return into the office and try and then, after the delivery of that, try and appease the investors, the people who make the economy tick. But I think the first thing is self-preservation, which is really to say, let me send the right signal, pass on the right message to the voters so that we get voted in, just like Donald Trump.
And I ask this question because very often it's difficult to reconcile the two, isn't it? I mean, you have to address the inequalities of the past that the ANC has to and must do. And then, of course, many of that readdressing or processes may not exactly appease investors who fear a populist approach. So it is a bit of a conundrum there.
Well, there has been. Remember, this will be his second January 8th statement as president of the ANC and president of the country after his elevation in 2017. And the things that came out of there really was free education, lands expropriation without compensation, and just general nationalization. Now, the lands without compensation was pushed through, and the argument that it's not as much as the EF would want it to be. Just complete without really much negotiations. And they were trying to push for bank nationalization, which is the central bank, and obviously the ANC won't concede to that. So I think the president really, given the tough situations we are in particular from a job delivery perspective, he needs to show guidance to investors. For me, I think more important just the land question is electricity. We've got ESCOM. Today we had a little bit of load shedding. Yes, they are saying there won't be much load shedding. But certainly I think that's one of the key issues that is going to have to be addressed, including job security. AMCU and the mines are still battling, and ESCOM has been cutting jobs, although at the senior level. But certainly it shows that, we're not covering the gap from a job perspective. Rather, more people might find themselves in the streets.
And it's interesting, you mentioned the question of power security, electricity security. This is high up on the list of investor concerns. With anyone thinking about plowing millions in here to build factories and create jobs. So ideally what I'm saying is that perhaps a manifesto cannot address that deep of a challenge just on one day. So you might still very well have business confidence after Saturday until the election, still at very depressed levels. I mean, that is expected.
It's a wait-and-see game, I think investors are going to do. What President Ramaphosa tried to do last year is to try and drum support from business so that they become major stakeholders, key decision makers in terms of the direction of the country, where the country would go in 2019. You saw that the GDP numbers revision was downwards, which is really not good for us. But I think we're also quite happy that the IMF and some of the international organizations still have lots of faith in President Ramaphosa's ability to be able to turn the economy around. But I think after the elections, when we see his new cabinet, it will be able to indicate, what, kind of position or message he wants to send to South Africa and the world. You've seen the Minister of Finance, Ms. Tito Mboweni, also coming out very frank in terms of what needs to be done, including reducing the government executive, for us to be able to address some of our fiscal challenges.
9.5 million people without jobs in this country. Can this manifesto offer anything new compared to previous years?
I don't think they're going to offer anything. I think we saw President Zuma trying to promise 1 million jobs. Without creating new industries, I think it's just going to be very tough. You saw that PMI numbers had a marginal improvement from November, 48.2 to 49 in December. If it just inches above 50, possibly, we'll start having a very good positive look. The rains are very patchy. We're supposed to have had good rains by now. Yep. Because remember, last year when we went into technical recession, your agriculture sector wasn't really, performing, to expectations, including manufacturing. So I think if our rains come well, and we manage to have enough power, to be able to drive. The Brexit issue, I think you talked about earlier on, also is an issue because, Europe is the biggest trading partner for South Africa, and that has been dragging for too long. So there are a lot of, I think, global external factors that might influence our overall economic performance apart from the domestic issues. And the domestic issues we just center around policy certainty and the firmness in terms of the president making decisions in terms of what he wants to do in SA.
And it's interesting you mentioned something like the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, because that essentially tells you, so it's a gauge for the manufacturing sector, isn't it? We're below that neutral mark of 50. In order for manufacturing to expand, it's going to need confidence. I think they hold about 11% of total employment in the country, so manufacturers need some sort of certainty in order to expand businesses. And until that really gets underway and demand starts picking up, not much can move on the job front, can it?
100%. Remember, manufacturing have taken over from mining. Mining used to be the biggest employer. Now we have manufacturing, a little bit of the service sector. But the biggest problem we face, obviously, is the relationship globally. China and the US still have this tug of war. 1 month they're warm, the next month they're cold towards each other. So I think if there's certainty around that, and also here we just put the right tools in place so that we drive confidence and sustainable. You don't want to really just come and promise, because business people, what they do is they say, let's have a wait and see game.
All right. And then just finally, before I let you go, Joseph, do you think there would be any hint as to what's coming up in next month's budget in February, coming from this manifesto on Saturday?
I think there has to be a very strong hint, and I also believe that Minister Mboweni, on his second comeback, remember he was the governor, so he's got a little bit of experience, not a very good relationship with the trade unions in terms of some of his policies he had, and he's taking a very strong stance. I think his strong stance really is to address the twin deficit, your trade deficit, your executive deficit, and he wants really to make sure that people believe that we're going to walk the talk, be able to deliver and make sure that business at least can plan, and they can only plan if there is policy uncertainty.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Joseph Busha there talking to us on what to expect on Saturday.